All right. So, what is the best advice you could have day one of your job? I've got probably a few things that have really helped me. I was very fortunate that my very first project I was ever on, my very first week, I came in and I screwed up something royally. And I'll never forget it because it really formed me in how I approach problem solving and teamwork. So I'm so glad that I had one of these kind of failure moments. And so this is kind of what I'd like to leave with you guys. First off, if you are a digital native or a millennial and you've grown up with technology around you, I want you to understand that a lot of people in the workforce today, even millennials, right? Because half of millennials grew up like me. We grew up without social media, without the iPhones, but then the later millennials kind of had more social media and devices in their life. But there is a large percentage of the workforce today that still does not communicate to people like this behind a screen. So I strongly want to urge you to, if you walk into a meeting, if you walk into something and you're taking notes, I strongly want to urge you to consider using one of these. Mainly because it doesn't put up a barrier between you and that person, and it allows you to show initiative, right? That, hey, I'm going to go ahead and take notes here. But when you're typing on a device or you're typing on a computer, you have to spend time clarifying, like, I'm not ignoring you, I'm not texting, or I'm not emailing, I'm just taking notes. So take notes on this. Paper notes, honestly, also prevent you from getting distracted from pop-ups that show up on your screen. Other things like, it prevents this barrier from being between you and that person. So I strongly urge you to consider that. You can always go back to your desk and synthesize your notes back into OneNote or Evernote or whatever it is later, and it actually might help you clean up the notes and help you remember things better and help you prioritize better. But strongly urge you to have every day one of your job is to have a couple of pens and a notebook and just be ready to take notes. And two, as you're taking notes, come up with a method that works for you. For me, I kind of have a to-do list on one side, but I always have notes. And you know what, the thing I'm doing and I have all my notebooks from my first consulting projects. My first few days are nothing but questions, acronyms that are written down with question marks all around it. And what tends to happen your first few days in, or even your first few years in, is there's just tons of questions. And this is the other thing that I want to remind you. When you are afraid to ask questions, let me tell you that there are no stupid questions except the question you are unwilling to ask. And that was the thing that screwed me up my first weekend, as I did the whole what's called fake it till you make it. That will not work in all jobs, especially in the job I was in consulting. You could not go in and fake it for 7 years as a consultant. So within my first week, my boss kind of let me kind of do my own thing. And at the end of the week, I turned in my work and it was all wrong, and they fixed it. And then they said, okay, now new rule. You have to ask questions. But one thing I would say is don't ask questions every 5 seconds. Don't wait 5 days to ask questions. So what I tend to do is this kind of 20% rule. When I'm given a challenge or given a project to work on, I say, first off, what is my budgeted time for this? And if they say, well, you have 40 hours. All right, it's Monday morning. Basically, end of the week is when you have to have this done. Great. Then I'm going to go ahead and spend remainder of Monday and come back and talk to you at 8 a.m. tomorrow on Tuesday. So essentially, I'm going to spend about 8 hours working on this problem, see if I'm going in the right direction. I'll do a checkpoint with you at 8 a.m. tomorrow. If I'm in the right direction, great. I'll hit the gas and get it all done. If I'm heading in the wrong direction, we'll correct, and I'll be on the right direction. Either way, I'll still have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to wrap everything up. So besides taking notes on paper, also remember to feel free to ask questions, but learn how to use about 20% of your time before asking questions. And again, if you're afraid to ask questions, that's only going to hurt you later on. I've never known anybody who was demoted or treated poorly because they asked questions. In fact, I would probably correlate the more questions you ask, the more likely you are to advance, because every time you ask a question, you're getting a gap in your knowledge or your inexperience is getting fixed, and you are growing and you are getting smarter and you're getting stronger. Now, the one thing I would say about that too is if you're asking the same question over and over again, something's wrong, right? You're not remembering or you're not learning. So that's all up to you of how, if you can't seem to get an understanding of something after you've had it answered to you, then you need to figure out how to write things down better or to remember things better. And the last thing I would say is learn to be a problem solver. And the way I did that was that when somebody would hand me a thing to do or a challenge, I would look at this and go, okay, what are all the things I don't know? And I would identify all those, okay? I actually don't jump to come up with a lot of solutions and test those solutions. That never happens because there are no solutions when you've been handed a problem you don't know how to solve. So what you have to do is you have to break it down and say, okay, what do I need to solve for? What do I not know? And once you figure out what you don't know, and you say, look, if I knew these 5 things, I could start to solve this problem. Well, then, okay, identify what you don't know. And then over here, identify all the resources that can help you learn about these things and solve for understanding them. And when you look for those resources, think about which resources are more accessible. And this is the thing that's really, really important. Which is more accessible, Google.com or your boss who is currently in a meeting right now and can't be disturbed for the next 3 hours, right? Google.com and YouTube and that person who's sitting over there at their desk who your boss told you is also a resource that you could talk to, that person, right? But and I've seen people who say, well, I'll just wait for my boss to get out of the meeting in 3 hours. Well, you can't do that. I mean, that's 3 hours you could be spending exhausting every one of your resources. So what you do is you identify what you don't know. You identify the resource that can help you learn about those things. You exhaust every one of those resources in order of accessibility. And once you've done that, you will start to gain more knowledge. And let's say by that time at 8 a.m. tomorrow, you come back to your boss and say, okay, here's what I've done. I've exhausted all these options, these resources. Here's what I know. I'm heading in this direction. What do you think? Then you can exhaust the resource of talking to your boss. So again, just those are some tips I think would have helped me if I knew them day one. I didn't really know them day one, but I started learning them from day one, and they've really helped me. So hopefully that can help you. If there's any other further questions or clarifications that I can give, feel free to post them in the comments below.